Well, hello, this is Hall Martin. I'm with Investor Connect, and today we're here with Candice Landry of 10E5. Candice, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hall. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate you having me in the program.
Well, that's great. Tell us more about 10E5 and what you guys do there.
With investors and also technology firms and attorneys, and we help them through the three major phases of the innovation lifecycle. That it'll typically start with an ideation and disclosure phase, and then once ideas or candidates are actually identified in that phase, then we can shift gears and start building and protecting assets. And then once we get through that, we actually help to shepherd the assets to the market. So ultimately we serve as a bridge between R&D and commercialization. And so we provide risk mitigation and increased efficiencies to their due diligence and their overall workflow, and some cost savings as well. When they're looking at the pre-deal, when they're in the pre-deal sort of phase, we can help with comprehensive due diligence. Then looking at their greater portfolio, we can help with growth or diversification or just an audit or other evaluation of their portfolio to make sure that it's actually maximized for value. This is all from an intellectual property perspective. And then we can also help specifically with portfolio companies and identifying and securing all the IP needs. Ideally, this is work that happens before the launch, but really anywhere between the idea stage and the product going to market, we can seamlessly plug in with whichever teams, including the legal team, and really make sure that we're getting them the most legal clearance for the longest period of time in their competitive landscape.
So, what phase do people normally bring you in? You said between ideation to product launch, but what is the practical time that you come into these deals?
Well, for more, I guess it really kind of depends on how established the company is and how quickly they're moving to develop the technology. So that's not to be ambiguous. It's really dependent on the team and how fast they're trying to move things along. And so again, ideally, the sooner we can get in, the better it is for everyone in terms of them getting, the most comprehensive assessment of, their intellectual property. And so if we can get in even before R&D has actually started, then that is fantastic. If R&D is already ramped up and a couple of candidate products, have already been identified, then that's fine too. We can really kind of sweep in, assess what the candidates are at that point, and then help to make sure, through data-driven analyses, provide insights back to the team, whether it's directly to the tech company or to the investors that are backing the company. We can give them that information that they need to make sure that, again, they have this legal clearance before they continue to move forward down the line and ramp up the investment any further.
Well, that's a good overview. There's been a lot of change to the IP landscape in the last couple of years. How do you see that impacting your business?
Well, it's actually been really interesting, and I absolutely agree with you. The recent past has provided a lot of opportunity for this kind of specialty or niche to come in and solve needs that maybe traditionally were done at one single law firm. And so those days, in terms of how IP is done, that has completely changed. Also, what has completely changed in the recent past is how businesses value IP. And so, again, to focus on technology companies, it's just a completely different game. And so, with the emergence of, bespoke or boutique or these niche specialists in intellectual property, whether it's for, investor, they can get what they need more in a sort of manufacturing process of sorts. And I know that sounds maybe a little sort of cold and distant, but that's actually the term that's being used now, where we're kind of switching more to a manufacturing type process of developing, cultivating intellectual property. And so you don't have to just go straight to this one firm and it's a one-stop shop. It's actually a pretty collaborative team of sorts that ultimately helps to convert that idea into an asset.
So, what are some of the strategies you use to give the client the best IP coverage or the best strategy or the best defense? What are some of the techniques you would put out there?
Well, first, we want to make sure that we understand, the competitive landscape or the game board, you can call it what the game board actually looks like. And we try to get that perspective with every case, but, with differing degrees of intensity. It just really kind of depends on what our partner or our client is looking for. Some require a really broad evaluation, of the entire industry, not just the tech domain or not just a subset of certain companies or competitors that they're really concerned about, either navigating around or, kind of jumping in, identifying and jumping into these white spaces or these blue oceans. So some of the research that we do can be as full spectrum as doing a complete industry assessment and then drilling down to the tech domain and then again to those specific players that are in that landscape.
And what are some of the best practices you use in order to do that?
Well, whether we're doing a full blown competitive intelligence landscape analysis or it's just some due diligence to support a patent application or something along those lines, this is all completely. It has to absolutely be quality focused. Quality is absolutely imperative to ensuring that the results that you have are the right results, or the most accurate depiction of essentially your competitors and what's out there. And then that way you can navigate through, I don't want to call it a sort of a landmine, but, it's this minefield of sorts in a way. So we definitely rely very, very heavily on data. So we say that we're a data-driven firm, and we absolutely do not compromise on quality. And so we have various verification, validation checkpoints throughout all of our processes that gives, in some ways, a more personalized engagement with our client. And they absolutely appreciate that. But at the same time, kind of wrapped up in that quality assessment is that we do not our work outside of the bounds of the United States. So we definitely respect those sorts of considerations that go into this, and we take it very seriously. So for our U.S. clients, we have, we're a domestic U.S.-based agency, and we do not export any of their information.
And so, what are some of the trends in the industry you see coming up that clients need to deal with?
Well, one thing that I've noticed, the changes that are happening in technology, kind of the velocity of technology, and when you look at that up against sort of the evolution of the patent system, sometimes it makes it very hard to kind of figure out what's the best strategy for your technology. So if you have a really rapidly moving technology, you have some kind of IT based deal, then maybe a patent is not the best thing to just jump into. I'm not saying that you don't need a patent, but really a holistic approach is the best way to try to overcome some of the, poor, synchronicities of the technology and then the way the patent's moving. There's a lot of growth that is coming up in the in patent law, and it's happening now. I mean, we've gone through a lot of changes. The last really big major change was in 2013 with the American Invents Act. And so that really changed the game from first to file, first to invent to a first to file system. And, even since then, there's just so many changes that have happened that have directly impacted biotech and pharma software. These technologies that seem really prominent in a lot of the startups that we look at. And so again, it's just really important that you take time to stop and have a real, thorough conversation with the founders, with the investors, whichever side of the table you're on. Ideally, it would be great, at some point to have that conversation with everyone involved. Intellectual property program is actually going to do what it's supposed to do, which is get you ahead of your competitors and make sure that you're ahead of your competitors in 3 to 5 years.
Well, do you see that trend continuing with the first to file issue, or do you think it's going to get reversed out?
I think that we're stuck with it for the foreseeable future. There's a lot of changes that are happening in the rest of the world. There's the development of a unified patent law, and when you think that, and you kind of imagine this unified system for patenting globally, arguably some pros and cons for sure, but you have to really stop and think, okay, well, how does the US fit into that scenario? Because no matter what your strategy is or what your technology is, whatever type of IP you're trying to secure, for the most part, you're not just competing in the United States. And so you have to have a global perspective. And so you need to make sure that you have someone on your team, someone in IP that's owning IP on your team who's sort of in tune with the buzz that's going on the patent law side, to make sure that you're actually, when you go to market, you've done that in a very secure and robust way.
And what are some of the other trends coming up in the industry?
Well, so let's see. Those are pretty monumental. So yeah, the unified patents, that's really the big one that we're looking out for. I would like to say that resolution insight to some of the stuff that we're working out in the United States. So right now, again, kind of going back to that difference in velocity, and maybe also kind of the change in types of technologies that have emerged recently, kind of thinking biotech pharma. So if you take antibiotics specifically, to even be completely specific about it, a lot of those biotech companies that are emerging, that are focusing on small molecule therapeutics, they're starting to feel like we're running up into these walls with the USPTO. I think it's not because they necessarily have poor quality applications. I think it's because, again, the patent system is trying to figure out and needs to figure out how to actually deal with these different types of technologies. And then at the same time, be able to maintain enforcement and a focus on quality. So again, kind of back to where I started, whether you're on the patent law side or you're on the technology side, quality has to be there in whatever the intellectual property work is that you're doing. So if it's a patent application, the patent application has to have very, very high quality, and it has to be driven by a very high quality technology. So, again, these sort of, in terms of buzzwords, they seem very, very new, although antibiotics are an old technology. I think they're really kind of pushing the USPTO to really consider an even broader range of inventions that are coming about, and how to be able to provide protection and security for those U.S. patents.
Well, you certainly have a complex job there with the changing regulatory landscape and the competing interests between the tech world and the patent world as well. How do you balance the two out?
For the most part, I can kind of lean on my various sort of domains of my background. I, came up as a scientist, and I feel like I will always be a scientist at heart. In fact, we definitely take a scientific method approach to our work, and we're very systematic. All cases are very different, but at the end of the day, we really figure out and optimize from our base system what is going to be best for that particular case, and we kind of go from there. But at the same time, I have pretty broad and extensive exposure and experience in business management, business leadership. And so you have to work at the interface of technology, strategy, and legal. And so you have to have some sort of expertise in those three domains, as well as be able to manage all of the stakeholders and contributors that come to a head from each of those three domains. And so it's surely a balancing act, but in fact, it's a perfect fit for me. And so, in being in kind of one of each of those, I'm most happy kind of being at that intersection of all three of them.
Well, that sounds great. Sounds like you're doing a good job with it. In our closing moments here, is there anything we haven't covered?
Well, I thought that it would be, if for the time that is allotted, typically kind of in this type of conversation, one of the questions that comes up is, can I just use a provisional patent? And, to continue to pick on patents here, can I use a provisional patent, and is that going to be sufficient? And I think that, kind of in a parting sentiment of sorts is, I think that are cost effective, absolutely. And they're a seemingly quick and easy way to get that patent pending stamp on your product. However, what's important is that they should not be rushed. I mean, a full-blown patent should never be rushed, and nor should a provisional patent application. And The due diligence that is required for any application needs to be thorough and, again, comprehensive, and that includes provisional applications. Because ultimately, and again, going back to the quality, to develop your technology and create an entire enterprise around it, and you actually invest time and other resources to do proper due diligence to even get to that point of making sure you have the appropriate intellectual property coverage, that would be the best case scenario that, and really truly I would advocate for the only way to do it. Once you start compromising quality at any of those, in any of those three components, then ultimately what you're building is a very weak, compromised, and short-term offerings, and you're ultimately compromising the value that you're trying to build up. So, if I could end on that, I would say provisionals might seem great, but they're really not a fast track necessarily to sort of taking a bunch of shortcuts just to get the patent pending stamp on your stuff.
Well, that's good advice, and I know many startups use provisional patents, and something they should consider in the future as to how they fit in. And of course, quality trumps all. If you don't have quality, nothing else counts. But that's all good advice as well. Want to thank you for taking time today, and appreciate your joining us and sharing your information about IP and the upcoming issues and strategies that people should use.
Well, thank you so much again for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, thanks.